Richard, there's so much foreign policy at play here that's not overtly being discussed. I know we're talking about deals, 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 and investment into the United States. But today there was a striking moment where President Trump acknowledged the new president of Syria. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But I'd also like to hear your thoughts on what's happening with the negotiations over potentially another Iranian nuclear deal. You, after all, are in Tehran.
So, since I'm in Tehran, why don't I start with that one? Although what happened with the president of Syria and the leader of Syria and President Trump is just extraordinary. It is an image that I can't get out of my head. The President Trump meeting someone who was not very long ago an al-Qaeda leader and who was swept into power and is trying to change his nation. But since I'm in Tehran, let's talk about Iran first. Iran is putting a lot of hopes on a deal. Iran has been watching what just happened in Syria. They want to be next. Iran wants sanctions to be lifted. And when I say Iran, I mean both the Iranian people, and the Iranian people definitely want to get out of this isolation that they have found themselves in for 45 years, but it's been particularly tough recently. Economic sanctions are hurting here. There are power cuts in this city. There was a power cut just the other day. It's almost impossible to do business, hard to move money around. People feel like pariahs. They feel unknown. They feel like they're painted with the brush of terrorism. So Iranians are definitely looking for a change. And the reason I can say that the Iranian government is also keen on this is that, one, we've been getting a lot more access. I've been to Iran twice just in the last month or so. And earlier today, I met one of the most powerful men in the country, the military, nuclear, and political advisor to the supreme leader, one of the few people who's authorized to talk about the sensitive negotiations. And he said that Iran wants a deal. And he said that Iran, in exchange for, and he listed out, I think, the most clear sort of enunciation of what Iran is hoping for from the supreme leader's inner circle in exchange for lifting sanctions. He said that if a deal can be reached, Iran would immediately stop or get rid of its stockpiles of highly enriched uranium. It would only enrich uranium to low levels that are required for civilian use. It would commit to never having a nuclear weapon. It would allow international inspectors in to oversee this entire process, but that in exchange for that, it wants all sanctions to be lifted immediately. And if that kind of deal can be reached, this official said that Iran would put that deal in place today. So they're keen to make this happen. They're watching what's happening with President Trump, and they think this could be a moment. So we'll see if it gets over the line or if some sort of framework agreement at least is reached in the next several days, coming weeks. But something feels like there's optimism here, I should say.
Richard Zickerman, I want to ask you about Syria, but on the subject of Iran, I want to get a couple thoughts in from Michael Weiss and Ravi Agarwal. So, Ravi, we began this by saying that there is fear in the Middle East that Donald Trump is not on the straight and narrow with this, that he can change his mind, that this negotiation between Iran and Steve Witkoff for a nuclear deal, and you heard the details laid out from the Iranian side by Richard, is ultimately not going to go anywhere, and that Donald Trump, what he does really want, is war with Iran. How concerned are folks actually in your reporting?
I think folks are very concerned that he's unpredictable. They're concerned about that from many dimensions. One, of course, is purely through the Middle East, but the other is also through the global economy. I think many of the Gulf leaders, they want a stable United States. In as much as they want to strike deals with Washington, they don't want Washington to jeopardize the global trading order with unilateral tariffs on everyone. So there are a range of concerns, keeping in mind that, the Biden administration's Middle East policy on some core fundamental issues didn't diverged that much from the first Trump administration's Middle East policy. And then it goes on to follow then that the Trump administration's second term policy hasn't changed that much either from the Biden administration's policy. You know, in very broad strokes, if you're Israel, if you're certain Gulf countries, maybe not Qatar. So for all of them, they're looking for stability, and they're looking for the kinds of deals that Trump is talking about. Again, keeping in mind, Katie, that it's very hard to track which of these, you know, $1.2 trillion total deals, which of them actually come to fruition in the future. So we're in an environment where we've incentivized all sides to exaggerate the claims of deals and to understate any details as to when these things could emerge. And then I'll just say one more thing to broaden this out a little bit. You know, it's clear that Trump wants to be seen as a peacemaker, you know, despite whatever he may think about how close Iran is to a bomb. He has so far held off pressure from Netanyahu in Israel to bomb Iran. So there is that. But also in other arenas, I can think of Ukraine and Russia. I can also think of India and Pakistan. There is a desperation to be seen as a deal maker, to rush into deals that can often either lead to, for example, Russian President Vladimir Putin saying, you know what, I'll kick the can down the road, or in India's case saying, you know what, you weren't actually anywhere near as involved in de-escalation as you say you were. So a lot of holes in all of this, Katie.
Well, let me, on that note, play Donald Trump talking about wanting a deal with Iran specifically.
As I've shown repeatedly, I am willing to end past conflicts and forge new partnerships for a better and more stable world, even if our differences may be very profound, which obviously they are in the case of Iran. I have never believed in having permanent enemies. I am different than a lot of people think. I don't like permanent enemies, but sometimes you need enemies to do the job, and you have to do it right. Enemies get you motivated. In fact, some of the closest friends of the United States of America are nations we fought wars against in generations past, and now they're our friends and our allies.
Yeah, the criticism of Donald Trump is that, as Ravi said, the deals that he ultimately gets maybe aren't great deals, or they're just nods at deals, and then the can is kicked down the road. On the subject of Iran, there is talk and reporting out there that suggests that Iran would be open to allowing U.S. inspectors in, but they'd have a uranium sharing deal with regional partners, so they'd be able to enrich uranium, and then they'd be able to sell it to their regional partners. The likelihood that the U.S. would take something like that, given how completely mistrusting or distrusting of Iran so many in this administration were in the past, and so many Republicans still are. Michael.
Well, I think, the fundamental question of how reliable and stable is Donald Trump as a partner or an ally can be answered easily. Why don't you ask Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the biggest loser of this trip to the Gulf? Literally everything the Israelis have wanted, Trump has completely undercut them on, and undercut them on in spite of the fact that Netanyahu made no great secret of the fact that, he was continuing the war in Gaza. He was waiting for Trump to get elected and then inaugurated because he thought he had a real partner in this White House. I mean, recognizing Ahmed al-Shara making this photo op in Riyadh saying he's going to lift sanctions, it remains to be seen if he will actually do it. That completely flies in the face of what the Israeli cabinet was telling Donald Trump's own National Security Council to do, which is namely impose maximum sanctions, a policy of maximum pressure on the new government in Syria with a mind toward regime change, because they fear Syria would be used as a staging ground backed by Turkey for the next October 7th. I've done reporting on this from the GOP side. So with the stroke of a pen, yet again, we see Donald Trump throwing his bestie, or his seeming bestie, under the bus. So if you're the Iranians, much less if you're the Saudis or the Qataris, you have to wonder how long is this sort of romance going to last? Now, I think, look, every leader in the Gulf that Trump is meeting with on this trip is a known entity to Trump, and vice versa, right? They've spent 8 years in Doha and Riyadh kind of taking the measure of this man. Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, is very close to MBS in Saudi Arabia. The Qataris famously were the interlocutor for a deal between the United States and the Taliban. And I think they're playing this pretty smartly, which is this is a man that doesn't care about national interests, strategic interests, long-term policies, much less principles guiding foreign policy. He wants to know what's in it for me. And it's very transactional. And I mean, in a sense, Doha has bribed him and bribed him brilliantly. I mean, the jet they're giving him, according to NBC's own reporting, is 13 years old. It's worth $400 million, but it's going to take about $1 billion for the United States to refurbish this thing, including removing any spyware that might be included in it and installing top secret mechanisms. So it's a hell of a trick to get the U.S. taxpayer to foot a bill of $600 million when you're calling this a gift to the United States by a Gulf ally. So I think they're playing Trump beautifully. And the question is, how long will it last before somebody else picks up the phone, calls him, and makes a deep and binding impression on him for the time being to say, let's just tear this up and start all over again?